So what is autism at the end of the day? If you go look at mainstream description, it seems to be such a damn complicated question. It's been described as one of the most heterogeneous disorders, meaning that it's really hard to describe, apparently. And every autistic person is really very much different from any other autistic person. And there is this quote about if you met one person with autism, you met one person with autism. You cannot extrapolate onto other people. So you'll have that some autistic people will have repeat certain kind of words, repeat certain kind of behaviors, and then another just doesn't do anything of that. You'll have some of the stereotypical autistic person who is like, I like trains, as in Sheldon Cooper, and a lot of autistic people couldn't care less about trains. And you have these so much variance in a lot of things. For instance, IQ can be in autistic people can be very high and it can be very low. So it's like you have autistic people who can be like very high IQ, very low IQ. So it's like you have both opposites in there, and it feels confusing. You could have hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to certain things. So for instance, some autistic people are very sensitive to light, others couldn't care less, and so on. So, and this hyper or hypo thing is very common. Again, as I said, it's with intelligence, it can be with a lot of other things. And so this leads to this description of autism as something that's so damn complicated to describe. So there is some sense of what an autistic person is like, and most often this is like kind of really a very stereotyped descriptor. So like what they lack understanding of social cues, or they lack interest in social interactions, or they are naturally rude and don't care about whether other people's emotions, or they're unable to experience other people's emotions, or they don't have emotions. So we are basically just robots in some people's eyes, and or we are just all these savant sort of types who has like these weird and useless but impressive abilities in some very limited set of things. We are described as being rigid, inflexible, and repetitive. So there is a lot of stereotypes there, but a sense of a generalized understanding, lack of generalized understanding of what the heck is autism to begin with, what it is really, what it is like. And I find this very funny because it's actually a case that the autistic perspective of themselves are pretty much ignored by the whole conversation. One of the things we tend to see about neurotypical interaction is the lack of depth and genuinity and interest and passion. So oftentimes I see professors and teachers and lecturers talking about autism, and it strikes me like this complete lack of interest on what are the autistic people actually saying, and as soon as we do look into our actual perspective, as opposed to use this stereotyped, generalized, vague, shallow description that we are given of ourselves, there seems to be quite clear patterns to emerge. So I will argue that autism is not nearly as damn complicated as it is oftentimes presented to be. It's just that we are not looking in the right directions, or rather, we are specifically ignoring them to study what it is like. So autism is a neurodivergent condition, so the brain is wired differently, and the autistic person doesn't think, feel, or experience things in the same way as a neurotypical person does. So this in itself creates a big problem with the fact that mainstream assessment is based purely on external behavioral analysis and on an external description of the symptoms without ever asking what's the internal motivation, what's the internal reasoning. So basically the mainstream description of autism virtually ignores entirely what autistic person thinks, feels, and how they experience things. Now, and this is a common thing in psychology. It's called a false consciousness problem, which I described in my book about why psychology is not a science the way it is done right now, and in some videos. And anyway, but why this is particularly important with regard of autism is that autistic experience is characterized by a very powerful inner experience. Let's put it like that. In fact, the word autism itself comes from the Greek autos, which is the same word that we have from automobile or automation, which means self. So just as automobile is something that self moves, we have this word coined at the beginning of the 20th century to describe these children who are very caught in their inner world. And this is really the description of what an autistic life is. And this is actually true at a biological level. So you'll have that the main descriptor, the main difference at the biological level of the autistic brain as opposed to the neurotypical brain is that you have in autistic people, you have, generally speaking, more brain cells and more synaptic connections. Synaptic connections are connection between different brain cells, which creates the pattern from which thoughts, behavior, feeling, perception, cognition derive from. So what you have is that there tend to be much more of it in an autistic person, and one reason behind this that has been found is that autistic people experience less so-called pruning, which is a biological process by which most of our brain cells and synaptic connections get cut off actually by the brain itself. And the reason that happens is in order to basically let most of possible perception, experience, emotion, and thought die off in a way. And why is that? Something that our brain does is to specialize into certain thinking pattern, and this is actually the difference between the neurotypical and the autistic brain. So you'll have that neurotypical people will follow very specific pattern. It will be much more stereotyped in a way. They follow heuristics. They follow quick thinking. They think in a more stereotyped way, which is focused on what is around them. So it will be much more aligned, and a lot of possible variations will be cut off. So basically the difference between the autistic person and the neurotypical person is that the neurotypical person is fast and rigid. So they have like certain patterns of thoughts and behavior and action and expression which are okay, and others which are seen as deviant and eventually they will be punished. They will have this group behavior, and the autistic person will fall out of it and they will be generally bullied for it or otherwise rejected for it. Whereas the autistic person is more slow and and flexible, which is both why autistic people tend to be creative. They tend to see things that other people don't. They can think in different way. They can filter information in a different way, but also because of this variability, they are not attuned to a very specific, to a certain specific pattern of thought or behavior. So, and you will have, therefore, that autistic people are characterized by more varied interest and more passion towards certain interest, and in general, more generally, you'll have more divergent thinking and cognition patterns, and the intensity will be higher, which is exactly what we have actually from the biological perspective. We have more stronger localized connections, more possible connections, stronger connections, because we fail this pruning process, basically. In short, there are so many, in our brains, there are so many possible options, so many cool things around, so many things that our brain gets attracted to and possibly very passionate about and very emotional about and very sensitive about, which are either the direction of this interest or the intensity of this interest is divergent. It's not normal. So why does this explain autistic behavior? One is social atypicality. So there are a lot of things that can gain your attention as opposed to what is considered to be normal, and there can be a lot of variation in that, and that's one of the reasons why autistic people are also different one from another, and why the stereotypical descriptions and the mainstream medical description of the condition, it makes literally zero sense. And that's because, so we have these things called spins and stims, for instance. Okay, spins is short for special interest, which we autistic people tend to have, and again is this very strong, very powerful interest that in intensity or direction is very different from what is considered to be normal. So you'll have, it could be all sorts of things. So it could be this stereotypical Sheldon Cooper, I like trains. It could be this stereotypical autistic boy who is into collecting bugs and things of that sort. It could be all sorts of different things. The difference will be in divergence. So possibly it is something that is not considered interesting by most people. So it's like everybody's talking about the weather, everybody's talking about the Kardashians, everybody's talking about football, and you'll have this autistic boy who is into bugs, and the neurotypical person will say, wow, that's weird, and reject it and shun it off, and the kid won't care because the connection is very strong, so it's very interesting for us. So I don't like bugs, I don't like trains. So the thing is, when I talk about a lot of autistic people, I can't really relate to what they're into, because it could really be a lot of different things. I have special interest. I have quite a bit of special interest, and this is actually one of the things autistic people are considered to be very rigid and repetitive, but you actually tend to have a lot of interests. It's just that these interests are not considered to be normal, either in direction or intensity. So, and again, sometimes they can be normal. So one of the reasons that autistic girls, we have this myth which seems to be incorrect, that autism is much more prevalent in boys, and it actually isn't. It's just that autistic girls both could have interests which are related to social interactions, because this is a general difference between boys and girls. So they could be excellent in masking. Masking is how autistic people manage to look less autistic and fit in better. And girls has been found to do this better than boys. And you could have that autistic people have this, autistic girls have this interest I mean, it doesn't have to be like that. I am an autistic person. I have an interest in psychology, and I can basically, tell you the entire scientific literature on many different subjects out of my head, quoting, the papers out of my head. And so, yeah, as a man, I'm not supposed to have an interest in psychology, but I do, and so this is one of my special interests. So it's not like, again, it's varied. It doesn't have to follow a certain stereotype. So you'll have that girls could be more interested in social activities and things related to social life and be excellent in that. They could learn perfectly well this copy-paste behavior which autistic people do of, carrying flawlessly how a neurotypical person acts, and they will pass very well as neurotypical. This is one of the most reasons why the whole stereotype description of autistic people makes absolutely no sense. Is that one of the most common and prevalent traits in autism is masking. So that's why having this focus on external things doesn't make any sense, because if you ignore the inner experience, you could have that behavior can be caused by a lot of things. So you could have that this inner experience of the autistic person is that they want to mask and they don't want to be noticeable as autistic people, and then you will just be confused because you're just ignoring the inner experience. You're just focusing on the external circumstances. So the whole describing a group of people who have the tendency to mask and to hide their traits because they are shunned or rejected or other reasons is just I don't think this video is coming very well. I'm just being a little bit lost right now. But anyways, going back to the special interest thing. So again, it could be all sorts of things. It could be somebody who is hides himself in the library and studies theoretical physics all day long, and it could be me as when I was younger. It could be somebody who hides themselves in a lab and plays with genetic manipulation, because building a lot of genetic blocks in biology is like building up Legos. It could be somebody who is into collecting every possible Pokemon in Pokemon Go. It could be somebody who likes trains, like Sheldon. It could be somebody who is into food and therefore has all knowledge about all the possible foods in the world and how to combine them. It could be someone who is into Spice Girls and therefore knows everything that there is to know about Spice Girls. It could be somebody who is into football and or a specific football team, and then they know everything about that specific football team. And so this is an example of special interest, and you can see the pattern there, but every special interest is different, and also the response to this special interest is different. So some will be more socially accepted, some will be not, some will be more easier to mask, some will be not, and this leads this heterogeneous presentation of autistic people and this observation of behavior from an external perspective, which makes absolutely no sense because it will be so varied. But if you look at the inner experience, you can clearly see the similarity, and this is just on the aspect of special interest, but this is one of the main ones. I think there are really two major factors in autism, and this is one. So intense and atypical neural connection is one of the key factors of autism. And if I explain it like this, it's not that complicated to understand. And all those examples I made of special interest, some are mine, some are not. So for instance, as I said, I couldn't care less about Pokemon. I couldn't care less about trains. I do care about theoretical physics. I don't care much about biology. So again, but I understand how a person who is completely into Pokemon, there could be this person who is completely into Hard Rock Cafe t-shirts, there could be this person who is completely into food. So I get the special interest part and how it works, and it's not that complicated to understand. It's just this incredible extreme level of passion and interest towards certain things, which lead you towards learning everything there is about it, playing with it, getting yourself immersed into it, oftentimes at the expense of social interaction and isolating yourself in a way from others and more normal and more common activity. And I would do this as a kid. You'll have other kids going around and to go on dates and flirt and play billiard, and I will skip school so I could actually learn the things that interested me, because school was not really a good learning experience for me, and I had to skip school so I could actually learn things. That's how I felt. But you can see a very clear, very defined pattern of thinking and feeling, and if you go to look at the external perception, you will be so confused about it, but that's because we are ignoring the inner experience of the autistic person. Why are they behaving in a certain way? And if we do focus on that, it's kind of actually very easy and clear to see why they behave in a certain way. And the easy answer at the biological level is that they have stronger, more synaptic connections, stronger connections, which leads at the behavioral level of an intense focus and interest onto certain patterns, which are both more intense in intensity and more diverse in direction. So that's just one simple descriptor, which I'd argue describes the autistic conditions very well, and it's very easy to understand. And it feels like, oh, it's so complicated because they are also different, but yeah, the commonality is in that. And again, the social skills, for instance, it's something that if you have a special interest like bugs, that's probably have people more being pissed off at you. If you have special interest, which is like in social interactions, then you can actually be extremely masterful in that. And so you will have that, one autistic person has like completely socially isolated, one autistic person is actually super popular, and you'll say, okay, this is so different, but it makes sense. It's just that we don't look at the autistic experience from the inside, which is so absurd, because as I said, the reason I mentioned before, the etymology of autism, of this very strong, autism comes from the word self, so this very strong inner experience. So whoever thought that we are having a condition characterized by a very strong, powerful and rich inner experience, and analyzing and studying it by completely ignoring their inner experience? And I don't know who decided this is like, and why they think this makes any sense at all is just beyond my comprehension. But anyways, this is an example of how autism is not so mysterious and complicated and heterogeneous as people make of it. It's just that the descriptions that we use and the approaches that we use are basically complete nonsense.